Well, I have to say, I was somewhat pleasantly surprised today. Joe Biden did not declare war on Russia. So, hey, our civilization can last another week, I guess. We don't have to worry about right now a nuclear war. Joe Biden came out in his rather short, which I appreciate, because normally when presidents come out, they kind of drone on for a long time because they like to hear themselves talk. Thankfully, since Joe Biden can't speak that well, he kind of comes out, says what he needs to do, and then he goes back in his room. And today, Joe Biden came out, and he sounded pretty conciliatory. He was saying, you know what, we've put these sanctions on the Ruskies, which of course is something I'm not a big fan of. I think sanctions are typically counterproductive. But Biden did not come out. He was not sounding too bombastic. He was not saying how, like, oh my gosh, he didn't sound like old H.W. Bush back in the lead up to the the 91 Gulf War, in which, of course, you have a similar situation back then, where Saddam Hussein had a beef with Kuwait, and he invaded Kuwait and annexed some territory or just occupied it. This is, of course, what the U.S. is fearing that Russia will do to Ukraine, whereas, as I've explained in the past, the reality of the situation is that the Russians are worried that the Ukrainian military is going to try and seize Crimea or Donetsk and Luhansk and break the Minsk agreement. But the reality of the situation isn't really pertinent because the way that the media portrays, Washington is going to, portrays the situation really is the effective reality in Washington. And so when the President of the United States, speaks of this situation, it's appropriate to compare it to 1991 and Saddam Hussein in the way that George H.W. Bush was talking about Saddam. Because, of course, we know now that Bush ultimately went to war with Iraq. That was what we call the first Iraq War here in the United States. And old Georgie's big line back then was that, we have to do something about this now because this is Hitler revisited. Yes, he invoked Hitler, compared Saddam Hussein to Hitler, and said this is just like seizing the Sudetenland, which was so terrible. And so we got to stop Saddam here before he takes over the world. Very hyperbolic and absurd, and warmongery. Biden did not sound like that today. Biden did not sound like he was interested in a war. I guess, maybe what the U.S. is doing here really was, it's a game of brinksmanship, or good cop, bad cop, whatever you want to call it. But you could hear from the questions that were asked. There were a few questions taken, and the press sounded like they were very disappointed in how dovish Biden's language was. The questions clearly were slanted in such a way that they were trying to push Joe Biden in a more hawkish direction. They were saying, hey, when you spoke to Putin on the phone, did he give any indication that he's going to change his dastardly ways? And who knows? Maybe these, I'm sure these were all pre-approved questions. Maybe the White House selected them specifically to make to underscore the point that Biden is not being super tough here, and that he's trying to be magnanimous and not escalate the situation. Biden made that clear. He said, hey, we don't want to escalate this situation. He said, Russia and the U.S. are two great powers, I believe he used that phrase, that have a lot of good that they can do together in the world. I mean, it was if you just took it in a vacuum, Biden's words today were very encouraging. However, I think they were quite duplicitous because it kind of goes against the entire, Washington foreign policy consensus. And the whole Russiagate stuff of the last 4 years. I don't think all of a sudden now that Joe Biden wants the U.S. and Russia to be friends. But just like with Biden's Afghanistan speech yesterday, which I've yet to discuss, I think that the tone of both of them were very good. And so even if they're total lies, it's a good sign that the White House thinks that this sort of rhetoric is what is going to work well for them. It's a good sign that the White House thinks that this is what the American people want to hear, even if they're lying to them, even if they're being duplicitous, even if they're going to backtrack later. It's good that the White House thinks that it's popular and a good PR strategy to be against the war in Afghanistan and against saber rattling with Russia. Additionally, the U.S. backed down from sending a couple of Navy ships into the Black Sea, which of course would be a direct, sort of provocation against Russia. Russia is the only non-NATO country, I believe, that has any presence in the Black Sea. And that, of course, is at Crimea. So if Crimea is completely encircled by NATO, and Ukraine, of course, and then the Americans start sending Navy ships in there, that could make the Russians feel a bit on edge, and it might encourage them to perhaps mass even more troops near their southwestern border. It's interesting. I mentioned Nord Stream 2 last week, and now I thought, well, maybe this is all a game of brinksmanship, and Biden is just, well, not Biden specifically. Obviously, Biden is an avatar for the administration, but the administration, the wizards of smart, the adults in the room, as they'd like to call themselves, perhaps what they were just trying to do is engage in a game of brinksmanship to sabotage Nord Stream 2, which was a gas pipeline running from Russia to Germany. And so maybe the goal here was to sour relations with Russia enough to where they could be sanctioned to the point to where Germany could no longer cooperate with them on Nord Stream 2. But a reporter asked Biden about this, and in a very aggressive manner, like, what? Didn't you at least, while you were on the phone with Putin, ask him or try and command him to stop, Nord Stream 2? Oh my gosh, we can't have Russia trading natural resources with Germany. Oh my gosh, we can't have peace between Germany and Russia. That could never. No, we can't allow that. We need these two countries to be constantly in conflict with each other, just like they have been, historically. And Biden gave a pretty decent response. He said, well, I've always been against Nord Stream 2, even when I was a private citizen, which is ridiculous. What does Joe Biden have to say about an agreement between Germany and Russia to sell gas to each, or, to purchase natural gas? None of his business. But, again, gave a good response. And then he said, it's a complicated issue. And, there's other people involved. And basically saying, it's not my call to make whether or not Nord Stream 2 gets built. And so I don't know what the game was that they've been playing. I don't know why the U.S. was ramping up the whole Russia tension thing here real recently. And then Biden comes out and gives this whole short speech, essentially diffusing all of that. Now, I don't know if it diffuses it in Russia's eyes. I don't think that's the case. But, I mean, in terms of the American people, Biden essentially, created a big crisis. And then now he just came in and said, don't worry about it. It's not a big deal. We got it covered. Russia, not so bad. They're bad, of course. Russia, very bad. But not so bad. So I'm pleasantly surprised, but I'm quite perplexed. I don't know what to make of this. I'm going to have to think about it some more. I'm going to collect more data, keep following the situation. But that's all I have to say on the Russia situation for now. Now, going backwards to yesterday, to Afghanistan, a topic that I didn't have time to discuss, Biden announced that they're going to push back the withdrawal date from May 1st to September 11th, which there's no real reason to do that. There's not going to be any. The U.S. is not going to accomplish anything between May 1st and September 11th. It's just there are a few possibilities as to why the administration did this. One is pettiness, because May 1st was the date negotiated by Donald Trump, and so they don't want to just fulfill the agreement, that was set up by Trump, because Trump is bad. So they want to distance themselves from Trump by moving the date back. Two, of course, they're picked September 11th, the 20th anniversary. It can be a big celebration. Oh, it's so symbolic, the date. There's that. And then three, it could be, which this is what me and Scott Horton and all the other great anti-war people on the internet are concerned about, and that is that this is all a ploy. You see, Zalmay Khalilzad negotiated a deal with the Taliban. The Trump administration signed on to that agreement with the Taliban, and ever since that agreement was signed, not one American has died in Afghanistan. The Taliban has not engaged in combat with them. They haven't killed any Americans. They've kept their side of the deal. And the deal was that the U.S. is going to be out by May 1st, 2021. Now, on May 2nd, 2021, when there are still going to be troops, U.S. troops in Afghanistan, well, the deal will be broken. the Taliban then have no reason to not attack the U.S. To not re-engage in combat, because the agreement was, hey, we're going to be friends, or not, we're going to stop fighting now, and we're going to get out by May the 1st. If you break that agreement, well, then the Taliban's probably going to go back to fighting, or at least I think that's the bait, or at least that's what I think the Biden folks are trying to bait them into. Because if the Biden folks break the agreement and then the Taliban starts fighting the U.S. again, well, then Biden is going to come up in September and say, oh, well, gee, we wanted to leave, but look, things have flared up. We're engaged in combat with the Taliban. We can't just run now. They're attacking us. We have to stand our ground and keep fighting. And so if Biden legitimately wanted to get out of Afghanistan, he would get out on May the 1st, because even if he really wanted to get out on September the 11th, think of what a PR disaster that would be if, between May 1st and September 11th, you're engaged in combat with the Taliban, and then you have to run away with your tail between your legs. Why would you take that risk if you really want to get out of the country? Because then, you take what should have been a victory, and it kind of looks like the withdrawal from the evacuation, of Saigon. So I'm still very concerned about Afghanistan, although I guess at least we can rest a little easier with regards to Ukraine. But I guess that's about all I have to say on that issue for today. There's a lot still left to discuss, but I think I can get to that later when we have more information, because I think there's a lot up in the air right now. I don't think that there's a coincidence that this Afghanistan speech by Biden was made one day before this Russia speech. There has to be some connection here that I'm missing. Initially, before this, I would have come in here and told you, like just yesterday, what I thought was, well, they're going to pull the troops out of Afghanistan because they're going to need them to fight in Ukraine, the way things have been going. But as of this very second, that doesn't seem to be the case. Now, perhaps Biden is trying to act magnanimous, and they might try and bait Russia into doing something stupid and firing off some kind of first shot that would, then justify a U.S. intervention to defend our vaunted Ukrainian allies. But I don't know. We'll have to wait and see. So I'll see folks back here tomorrow.